a glass to the past, and the ladies cross the ages, forward fathers from the motherland whose lives are on the pages. And the bottle said it best when he told us all the world's a stage. So fellas, grab a glass and lift your spirits to the seventh age.
Welcome one and all to the Seven Ages Audio Journal. It's time once again to pour up a glass and pull up a chair as we gather together here in our very favorite corner of the Cross Time Pub, and as we continue to scour catacombs, forbidden caverns, deep forests, and forgotten archaeological wonders in pursuit of answers to the many mysteries of the ancient past. As always, fresh in from off the road, from somewhere out there, I am Micah Hanks. He is Jason Pentrail. Sir, it was great to see you recently, by the way. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing well. Yeah, it's always great to get out and get together once again, have a few drinks, a few laughs. And so, even though we do this every month and we get together and do the podcast, it's just not the same as being together in real life, especially when you got a bunch of other like-minded folks around. So we had a really good time here recently up in North Carolina. And we made the most of it, I think.
Yes, indeed. Greensboro, North Carolina, catching up with Malcolm LeCompte, our good pal George Howard, all the fine folks up there in Greensboro. And, recently, Jason, I have been back here in the formerly flooded foothills of Appalachia and hard at work. I'll tell you something else, too. This is a first, I think, for me, because I moved into a new house late last year, and then the flood struck. And recently, of course, as recently as the last time I saw you, we had a significant heat wave hit us here in the mountains. And for the first time, I am in my air-conditioned new studio. The air conditioning is actually running, and I've got my filters set up so that the noise gate on my microphone doesn't allow the air conditioning noise, which is really quiet anyway. It doesn't cut through the microphone. This is, I think, the first time I've ever been sitting in a properly air-conditioned studio behind my normal setup and being able to do this. I mean, it sure is a difference from the normal heat we encounter out there at archaeological sites, my friend. First time for everything, right?
Well, there's something to be said for central heating and air, that is for sure. But again, when we talk about it from an archaeological perspective, they only knew what they knew, right? So they didn't know what central heating and air was, but we do. And when you leave that field environment, especially this time of the year, and you make it back to your home, definitely that's something to be accounted for. Not to mention, though, you moved into your new house. How close was it to the storm hitting there? Was it the same week or even within a month of?
It was within a month. I closed on the house. I went back to my rental property. I mean, this probably happens a lot. You buy a new house, but then you got to move in. And so I closed on the house. 2 days later, I was out in northeastern Utah checking out some of the beautiful Fremont art from that region. I've gone out there a couple of times, and I wasn't just looking at archaeology, although there was a lot of archaeology, but I was also looking at paleontology and really, just everything the region had to offer. I love Utah. I think it's beautiful out there. But I was out there for about a week with my brother and his wife. Then I came back to North Carolina, then started the move-in process. I'd owned my home for more than a week, and I began to move in. And just about the time I got moved in and started unboxing, the storm hit. The Great Flood. And yeah, I think I'm still actually unboxing. I've definitely got some books back there in the library that are still in boxes. So, that effort is still underway. But before long, I think I'll actually have a completely configured environment here at my house. I think it's actually okay enough downstairs to be able to invite people in. But in terms of things that are going on of archaeological interest, I've got one here for you, Jason, that I just wanted to do as a fast blast here. And I'm going to actually quote from my good buddy Ryan Whalen, who wrote for us over there at thedebrief.org that an ancient Egyptian genome has finally been unraveled after 4 decades of study, thanks to a sample collected from a mummy dating back to the time of the first pyramids. This story, Jason, actually broke as of today when you and I are behind the microphone. They say that the achievement marks the first complete sequencing of a genome of such antiquity collected from that region. Now, of course, they'd already sequenced partial genomes, as I understand it, but this one, again, dating all the way back to some of the earliest pyramid structures. In other words, Egypt's first pyramid age. So it's roughly a 4,500-year-old genome. They say the genetic data revealed information about the movement of people from over millennia as 80% of this individual's DNA corresponds to ancient North Africans, but 20% also is related to ancient West Asians. Now, that's not necessarily surprising because we kind of understand ancient Egypt to have been a melting pot, and this is, shown in their art, and then also, of course, in the known physical anthropological remains. There were people from various regions, and they all kind of came together in ancient Egypt, and that's always been fascinating to me because, as you know, Jason, this is kind of a thing that happens a lot with history and archaeology. When we look back to eras before there were, again, maybe the proliferation of written records, this was definitely recorded history. It was recorded in a different way, but we didn't have photographs. And so we have this idealized perspective on how people were, how they acted, what they looked like, what they ate, what they wore, all these things. Now, with Egypt, due to their rich and very, very vibrant and colorful imagery depicted at archaeological ruins strewn throughout places like Luxor and other surrounding areas, we can definitely get a pretty good idea of what the Egyptians looked like. And we've already known that it was sort of a melting pot, but now this new genetic information with this fully sequenced 4,500-year-old genome, it's only making that picture clearer. And this is such a fascinating area of research to me, how genetics is opening up these new avenues to understanding the past.
Yeah, this whole entire field is something that continues to grow, and every year we see more and more of these type of reports coming out. Recently, I would say in the last probably 24 months or so, we've seen a huge increase across the board in just technology, biology, just all of the things that are able to be done today that would have just been science fiction a few years ago. And it's really changing opinions, changing ideas of what we thought about earlier time periods. And I think more than anything, what we're discovering is that nothing is quite what we thought that it was. There's so many things, especially in the world of history and archaeology, that are constantly being overturned, redetermined, looked at from a different view. And ultimately, there's so much that we still don't know, but yet it's kind of disheartening in a way because what we think we do know, often given enough time, is also proven inaccurate or outright wrong. So these things are constantly changing, constantly evolving. But to be able to get a glimpse scientifically, looking back to some of the earliest Egyptians, I think that really kind of helps paint the picture of not just a singular type of approach to their building and their style, but again, it's a blending of different things that were happening in that area. And even today, that area is a mixture of so many different ideas, thoughts, religions, cultures. So it's not surprising really to see those type of results coming back.
Yeah, I agree. It's really intriguing, though, again, as the expanding picture compares and contrasts. Sometimes it differs from, sometimes it aligns with our expectations and past attitudes, but in any case, we're always learning something new. Also, sir, a belated happy Asteroid Day to you, which we celebrated on June 30th, and it seems rather apropos because I hear that there was quite a news story from down your way, something seen in the skies over South Carolina that kind of relates to this.
Yeah, this was a big story. I'm sure everybody probably saw it on their social media feed. There was a meteoroid that came down in the South Carolina, Georgia area. They weren't quite sure when it first happened exactly what direction it was headed, but they knew it was in that general area. Now, what's unique about this is the middle of the day. So we're talking 12:25 p.m. on June 26th. A spectacular daytime fireball shoots across the sky here in the southeastern U.S. before disintegrating into a thunderous explosion. That's how people in the general region near Atlanta, Georgia, described it. Now, the American Meteor Society, or AMS, received more than 200 reports from 20 different states of the brilliant midday object as it sped from north to northeast to south, southwest over the state. According to Mike Hankey, the AMS operations manager, quote, many instruments recorded the fall, including National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration satellites and Doppler radars, and even some of their All-Sky 7 cameras. Now, this made it very unique because many dash cams, CCTV, security cameras, all sorts of different things were catching this as it was happening. So we had many different views, many different takes on it. Normally, we think of these things as occurring in the middle of the night, the shooting star, that sort of thing. This was right in the middle of the day. It was brilliant. There was no mistaking what you were seeing. Now, Bill Cook, who is the lead of NASA's Meteoroid Environment Office, said in a statement that the fireball was traveling at approximately 30,000 miles per hour and broke up at an altitude 27 miles above West Forest, Georgia. Cook estimated that the meteoroid was about 3 feet wide and weighed more than a ton. According to calculations done by the Center for Near-Earth Object Studies, the object struck the atmosphere with a total impact energy of nearly half a kiloton of TNT. Now, that is something that you just don't have the opportunity to see. Now, when we look at weather patterns, we don't think of these things necessarily in that same range because we have that long-term tracking ability for hurricanes, for storm fronts, for those type of things. But when something just appears like that and streaks across the sky almost instantaneously, before you even have time to say, what is that? It's already impacted with that amount of energy. Again, we're talking about enough that if it were to, actually make ground contact in a place like Atlanta, Georgia, a very populous city, it could do some real damage. And so again, that makes us think back over time to deep history, deep time, and all of the times that our planet has potentially been victim to these type of things. Now, this was a much smaller impact, but needless to say, even at that size, to light up the sky right in the middle of a beautiful blue clear day and be caught on camera, I think was something very special to see and experience here in the Southeast.
Yeah, it is rare to see those in the daylight. I did see a bolide streaking through the sky many years ago, and I mean, it was so beautiful. It was orange and pink. And I mean, it was like, maybe 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the evening in the summertime, so it was full daylight. And to see that much color just streaking through the sky, and people were like, what is that? And I'm like, eddies, folks, it was a meteor. But I mean, they can really be bright, vivid, and beautiful. And honestly, in my opinion, seeing one in the daytime being that colorful and bright is even more impressive than the nighttime viewing. But it's important also to point out, we just celebrated International Asteroid Day, and this in recognition, of course, of the Tunguska blast of 1908, which occurred on June 30th. And that was an airburst. But this airburst was strong enough that without ever actually impacting with the Siberian permafrost, it nonetheless caused, I think 870-something square miles worth of damage in the form of flattened trees. We know it was probably a meteor, but some have suggested it could also have been a comet. In any case, there are particles that have been retrieved from various resin samples in the region near Ground Zero, where, intriguingly, by the way, directly over the blast site, most of the trees were left standing up, and then all those in the surrounding area were completely flattened for hundreds of miles. But they also have found evidence of shock quartz and other things. Some have even tried to suggest there's a lake a good ways to the northwest of what's presumed to be the primary blast site. And some have tried to say that that lake might actually be a crater. I don't think that there's a very good case to be made for that. And in fact, in recent satellite imagery obtained by NASA's Landsat 8, as recently as last July that I was looking at the other day, you can actually still see the blast site. They say that there's nothing evident, but it actually, you can definitely see a depression, sort of, an area where the trees are differently colored, and that's, again, well over a century after the presumed impact occurred. Impact being, again, an airburst. But the important thing about the fact that this might have been an airburst, and yet it would have had a blast range comparable to the size of Washington, D.C. So therefore, again, like you said, Jason, if one of these things actually occurred, God forbid, in the future at any time over a major populated area, it could be widespread damage. Well, with Tunguska, we look at that, and many are saying this is probably not only the most devastating meteor incident that occurred, an airburst incident in recorded history, but this is probably something comparable to, this is the little baby brother of whatever might have happened around 12,800 years ago at the time of the onset of what they call the Younger Dryas. Now, again, that is in accordance with the idea of there being an impact hypothesis. This is still being debated by scientists, but as you and I have discussed, I'm very keen on the data that supports a potential airburst incident as the primary causal agent behind the Dryas. And again, we look at the platinum anomaly and all this. We've talked about this stuff for years. So when we look at incidents like this, I think back to the past and I look at the biomass burning that there's evidence of. We know so many of the scientists of course, who have written these papers, Malcolm LeCompte, Joanne Ballard, Mark Young, Chris Moore, so many others. The accumulation of the evidence that I have seen strongly suggests the likelihood of two things. A, the dry ice was probably related to some kind of a impact or airburst event. And B, if it were an airburst and we can't therefore find any kind of a crater, and people still try to dispute that. They say, well, we would easily find a crater if there had been an impact of any kind that occurred that long ago. And I'm thinking, yeah, but there wasn't a crater left at Tunguska. It was an airburst. It was the biggest event of its kind in recorded history. And what do we have? No crater. It's all spelled out for you. And I was talking with Mark Young recently about that, and I said, if there was no crater left and thereby no overt evidence of the impact event from Tunguska, or potentially from that which involved the dry ice, think how much more frequently these kinds of airburst events might actually occur. They have probably happened a whole lot more throughout history than we actually know. And so I think about NASA's planetary protection efforts, the search for NEOs or near-Earth objects. We have the DART mission, satellite redirection efforts to try and take a kinetic impactor, launch it into an asteroid, set it off course, and thereby, God forbid, in the event that Earth is on a collision course with a city-killer asteroid at some point, we might be able to save humankind, Armageddon, as in the name of the film style. So we need to be taking this extremely seriously because, again, what the data seems to suggest to me from Tunguska alone, really, is that incidents like this may have happened a whole lot more throughout history than we probably are aware. And we need to be aware.
Well, I completely agree. It's something that is just the cost of doing business, honestly. There's a lot going on out there in the solar system and the galaxy and the universe. And these things happen, and they happen pretty often, especially if you check out the moon, check out other planets, check out other celestial bodies out there, and you're going to see, again, plenty of evidence for these things happening. And so, whether it's ocean strikes, land strikes, air bursts, these bodies moving into Earth's atmosphere is just something that happens, and it happens pretty often, probably more often than people realize.
I agree. And again, I don't really understand why there is such an aversion to some of these ideas by scientists, although I was speaking with a colleague of mine, a scientist, he's a physicist, up at the University of New York, Albany, yesterday, and he was saying, and many scientists have said this, but again, he was the most recent that I've talked about this with. He said, there are so many instances where we look back throughout history, and there are so many concepts that are well known to us now, but at one time it was considered heretical, or it was considered pseudoscience, or it was considered this or that. And people have been attacked and they have been, castigated for having viewpoints or ideas or interests. And later it turns out that, hey, you know what? Microbes exist. Hey, you know what? Meteors exist. That the Earth, heaven forbid, is not at the center of the universe. Anyway, I could go on, as you know, but science does progress slowly. There are other ways of saying that. I don't want to be crass here. I even have seen T-shirts recently talking about, well, I'll say it. They talk about how science progresses one funeral at a time. And unfortunately, that is to an extent true. But again, I think that there's just a good case to be made, not only for having an open mind, but especially when we think in terms of planetary defense, understanding that there are perils that we may face, and that again, in the ancient past, humans may have faced. And we have some proxies that can help us to unravel what might have happened. The evidence won't always be overt. Neither were those microbes until we had microscopes, right? Anyway, well, turning our microscope over in the direction of what's happening over at the SAAJ Patreon, Jason, who manages all our online affairs, what's happening over there, sir? What do you got going on?
Well, as usual, we are attempting to get a lot more material up. It has been a little bit of a slow summer. Lots of people this time of year are on vacation or they're involved in field schools, and all of these things are happening. But we are working hard to get some new stuff posted over there. But continuing, we have the Digging Deeper podcast, we have the Cross Time Pub, and of course, we have the Green Dragon Book Club. We're about to record this week a brand new episode with a brand new book. So this will be the third book that we're getting into over there. So swing by, check it out. We have a great time over there. Lots of extra content to keep you satisfied until these episodes come back out once a month. And in addition to that, we also have our TeePublic store. It's recently been launched. It's up and running now, so you can follow the link in the show notes I just click on that link. It'll take you right there. We have about 9 designs that you can choose from. And of course, you can select what type of product you would like to have that design put on and sent to your home. So again, if you like to support what we do here, swing by TeePublic, check out the extra content over on Patreon. And something that we haven't addressed in quite a while that we need to is, again, the importance of rating and review. Now, I know you hear this every time you listen to a podcast, click on a YouTube video, but it truly is important to the algorithms. We need to get more listeners out there involved with what we do here at 7 Ages. If you've been a long-time listener or even someone more recently coming to the show, please take a moment and leave that review. It really does mean a lot, and it helps get the word out there. So again, your support is very valuable to us, and we appreciate you taking the time to do that. TeePublic, Patreon, and of course, rate and review means a lot to us here as hosts and creators. And again, it helps spread the word. And if you know someone who's interested in archaeology, history, or just good conversation, again, maybe suggest the show to them, and we can maybe see the numbers go up a little bit before we get into 2026. Our goal for the end of the year is to increase by at least a couple thousand listeners. So do the best you can to help us do that.
That sounds fantastic to me. Jason's always over there working hard, or he's out there burning up the roads. In fact, you recently made your way to the Town Creek Mound, I believe, did you not?
I did. As I was on my way up to Greensboro to meet with all of our friends for a great weekend, I took a side trip to go visit one of my old haunts, if you will, the Town Creek Mound. It's a beautiful Mississippian age site. Not a lot of people know about it. It is a very small Mississippian site, but packed with history and archaeology. Very important to understanding prehistory here in North America. So I was able to sit down, do some 7 Ages audio journaling out there on the road, get to see the new museum exhibits that they've put up. And I sat down with historical interpreter Megan A. for a little discussion about the Town Creek Indian Mound, as it says, again, a Mississippian age site. Very, very interesting, very close to the famous Morrow Mountain State Park. So if you understand anything about North Carolina history, you know that most of the lithics in the state come from that general area around Morrow Mountain, a beautiful place to visit. And we had a great time there at Town Creek. And again, a place I encourage everybody to go see.
Absolutely. Well, we're about to hear from Megan right now. When we come back after this break, Jason will be sitting down and speaking there at the Town Creek Mound for a little audio journaling right here on the 7 Ages Audio Journal.
Town Creek Indian Mound is an unusual phenomenon in the history of North American archaeology. Most archaeological sites are investigated for a few years and then abandoned as archaeologists move on to new locations. Where long-range research has been conducted, it has often been under several directors and different plans of research. Town Creek, situated on Little River, a tributary of the Great Pee Dee in central North Carolina, has been the focus of a consistent program of archaeological research for more than half a century. This research has contributed to scientific understanding of the original inhabitants of our continent and has provided educational opportunities for many graduate and undergraduate students in anthropology. Moreover, these contributions to science and higher education were made as the site contributed directly to public education. Town Creek is one of the most popular state historic sites in North Carolina. In the heart of the Great Depression in the 1930s, Geoffrey Coe, then an undergraduate student at the University of North Carolina, visited the site with Harry T. Davis, the director of the State Museum. They discussed plans for preservation and investigations with the owner L. D. Frucci. Following their visit, Frucci agreed to donate the mound and about 2 acres to the state, rather than follow his earlier plan to level the mound and improve his cotton field. Archaeological excavations began in the spring of 1937 under Coe's direction, and this work has continued with few interruptions. Excavations began at Town Creek as a works-progress administration project. It was in the context of the make-work archaeology of the department that Town Creek had its beginnings as an unusual phenomenon in North American archaeology. Most of the archaeological investigations in the late 1930s were conducted as salvage projects in reservoir basins slated for flooding and the national move toward electrical power. Archaeological sites and reservoir areas were excavated quickly and completely with few supervisors and many untrained laborers. This salvage approach spread to include sites that were not endangered by floodwaters, such as Irene near Savannah, Georgia, Town Creek was an exception to this tendency. Under Coe's direction, the research plan at Town Creek became a long-range, systematic, painstaking, and thoughtful. By the beginning of 1950, the excavation of the mound and some of the surrounding area was sufficient to provide a basic understanding of the prehistoric story at Town Creek. In the Archaeology of Eastern United States, edited by James B. Griffin in 1952, the first comprehensive volume on the prehistory of the East, Coe described Town Creek as part of the, quote, Pee Dee focus. This was a term used to describe the archaeological manifestation, sites, and artifacts of Indian farmers who lived in villages on the floodplains of the Pee Dee River system. These farming people began burying their dead on the bluff on Little River and eventually built a mound upon which they placed a temple. This pattern was clearly similar to the Mississippian mound builders in the West, and Coe saw Town Creek as the eastern frontier of this way of life. Well, it's been quite a while, but 7Ages is back on the road, this time in Town Creek Mound here in beautiful North Carolina. I am on site doing the audio journaling that we love to do so much. Again, for everyone listening, we've been trying to get back out on the road, and it's great to finally be back in our element and visiting a site that I've been to several times in the past, but it's been quite a while. We've been doing the Mound Builder series on the show. We've had quite a few prominent locations. This one's got a real special place for me. I lived here in North Carolina for 4 years and would often come over here to visit the site. And it's very unique among Native American sites here in North America, but specifically of the Mississippian vintage here in North Carolina. So we're going to talk in depth today with Megan, who's a historic interpreter here at the site. And she's going to tell us all about this amazing site, Town Creek Mound here in North Carolina. So welcome to the show, Megan.
Thank you for having me.
Well, you're most welcome. This is a very unique site. As we toured the grounds this morning, we talked about some of the unique features of the site, a Mississippian complex, but on a much smaller scale. It has all of the things that you would expect to see from a large Mississippian site, just kind of shrunk down. But that makes it all the more interesting because it's unique in North Carolina and throughout the Southeast for both its cultural association and its size. Let's begin today with a description of the location. So where exactly in North Carolina are we located here?
Yes, we're in the south central Piedmont area of North Carolina. We are kind of in the middle of Raleigh and Charlotte and sort of also close to the Sand Hills. So when people first started coming to Town Creek over 10, 12,000 years ago, this would have been a really great location along the river where people had access to all sorts of building materials, stone for making tools, but also close to both the Piedmont ecosystems and the Sand Hills.
Yeah, and again, location, right?
Yes.
Location's always important to these sites, and that's how so many of them have been discovered over the years. Now, this one, from what I understand, does set about 16 feet above the surrounding floodplain, so it's in a very kind of strategic and good location for building outwards as far as domestic activities, utilitarian use of the area around. You're up above that floodplain. What is the river that is adjacent to the site?
Yes, this is a little river.
A little river.
In a couple of miles, it'll meet up with the larger Pee Dee River.
Okay, and Pee Dee is probably one that you're more familiar with, a very large and very important to the history of both North and South Carolina. Is it still referred to as the Yadkin when it's closer up toward the Uwharrie?
Yes, Yadkin Pee Dee is
okay.
Talked about together.
All right. So also home to many other prominent cultures such as the Hardaway and other North Carolina cultures that you may be familiar with. But today we're going to talk about the Mississippian occupation here at this site and all of the intricacies. This, believe it or not, to be such a small site, it is actually very complex according to the archaeology, and it has a long history of archaeological exploration here on site. So let's talk about the known period for Town Creek. Oftentimes on the show, we're covering paleo, Clovis, those type of things, but we're moving to the opposite end of the indigenous time scale. So what are we talking about here at Town Creek?
Yes, we do have the history that goes back into the Ice Ages. And so hunter and gatherer groups in North America were coming here for a very long time. But a little over 1,000 years ago, this village was established here. And this became a center for regional politics, trade, and religious celebrations for Mississippian communities all in this area.
And as we know, Mississippian culture is very complex in many ways. Lots of ceremonialism, lots of iconography, of all of those things that we see at places like Etowah, of course, Cahokia, Spiro, all of these other sites that we've had the opportunity to visit. Those indications are present here, but again, on a much more personal and small scale. So as today stands, if someone comes to visit the site, what is the setup of the landscape here for people to view and see?
Yes, so the first thing when people exit the visitor center out the back, they'll walk through a reconstructed prairie, and this is to show what the landscape would have been like here. When this was a village, there would have been more prairies and gardens surrounding a village and not so much dense forests. There would be trees scattered around, but primarily these grasses and gardens. And then people will see the palisade that goes around the site, which is a series of upright posts that surrounds the village. And there are two entrances. Most people enter by the north tower, but there's a south tower. From there are 3 reconstructed buildings inside the village, showing a reconstruction of a house and 2 of the religious. There's also a reconstruction of the central post in the middle of the site.
Yeah, so again, as you approach from the visitor center, you'll be able to see all of the construction and the remnants, rather, of what was there. And that's based off of the archaeology. Now, before we get into some of those key parts of the site, let's talk about the Meadow Project, because that's a new addition since the last time I was here. It's very beautiful, very striking, but tell us a little bit about, as you approach the Palisades to enter the site, about this beautiful new Meadow Project and what the intent of that project is.
Yes, so the reconstructed prairie shows a lot of native plants that would have been in a Piedmont area like this. And so there are lots of grasses that are good for building materials. And when you look at the reconstructed buildings, you can see a lot of that. The grasses were used to thatch the roof and make rope. The uses for all of this just extend on. A lot of the grasses and other plants out there are good for foods for people and for animals. So it attracts more animals in and around the village. And the gardens would also be in areas like this. And of course, for a village like this, people are growing lots of corn and squash and all sorts of plants, the plants that people grow in their gardens. But they would have burned the prairie periodically, so every year, every couple of years. And that is something we try to do as well.
Yeah, and again, as you approach, it just really sets up the idea of a more authentic experience of what it may have actually looked like during the height of its use. And talking about that height, let's discuss Town Creek as a civic and ceremonial center. So the early archaeology by Coe and others often kind of describe it in a certain light as being a centralized location for people to come to, but the archaeology shows a different story. So tell us about Town Creek as a civic and domestic area as well as a ceremonial center.
Yeah, so as a village, there were so many different daily activities in these spaces. There's lots of evidence for cooking and making pottery and clothing and stone tool work, and people are eating lots of fish and deer and rabbits, turkey. The list of foods goes on and on. We have lots of information about the plants that people were eating, but we do know that would have been an important part of people's diets, especially corn and foods like that. So these areas would have been probably the busiest and most active on any given day, always the smell of cooking fires and people talking and working together within probably especially family groups.
And you said a couple of things there, Megan, that really I think people maybe overlook is you come visit a site like this today and you just see the remnants and the recreation of what life would have been like. But the things like the smoke in the air, the smell of food cooking, people going about their daily lives just as we do today, kids running around, splashing in the creeks, all of those domestic things that are happening at a site like this that often I think get forgotten about or overlooked. And it's those type of experiences that I think is one of the really interesting parts of archaeology. The pottery, the utilitarian aspect of how they used things, why they used things. Native American sites, I've noticed over the years, have a tendency to sort of carry the stigma of everything was ceremonial, everything was connected back to some sort of ritual, and that's simply not the case. Yes, those things did happen. However, they were normal people with normal problems, just like the rest of us. Kids misbehaving, getting muddy, splashing in the creek, doing all the things that kids do. And I think that often gets overlooked. But there is a very significant amount of archaeology that's been done here. Many, many burials, many post holes and structures. So tell us a little bit about sort of the site back when Co was here, their initial archaeological investigations, and kind of lead us up to where we're at today.
Yes, archaeology started here in 1937. The farmer who was in this area, Lloyd Frucci, was getting a little upset that people were coming in and disturbing all of his cotton fields in order to get to the mound and hope to find things. So he had plans to plow the mound flat, and this happened to a lot of sites. But instead, archaeologists like Geoffrey Coe became very interested, and they received permission. Actually, the paperwork was filed on April 1st of 1937. So that started off a 50-year project for the site.
Yeah, and of course, you know, as you look back at the incredible book that was written by Coe, of course, there's been newer books with updated information since then, and we will talk about that before we conclude today. But to see those early excavation photos and to really understand how much activity was here on this small site, so many burials, so many overlapping post holes showing the remnants of palisades, showing the remnants of buildings and homes and houses and things of that nature. Today, as you come and visit the site, what is the distinction between the public portion of the site versus the ceremonial? So rather, how is it laid out as far as a ceremonial portion of the site versus a domestic portion of the site?
So the houses were on the north and south sides of the site, sort of arranged 5 on each side. And the central area of the site from west to east included the mound, a central area or a plaza with a post in the center, and then another area of civic and religious buildings. And so there is a symmetry that is on the site. The few buildings that are reconstructed now often don't show all of that, but when you start seeing and walking around, it becomes really clear that there is a central portion of the site and houses would have been on either side.
Yeah, and so again, these are some things that you have to imagine as you come to the site, but that's why we have people like Megan to fill in those details for us, who can really explain a lot of the details of a site. Now, the archaeology here, it's basically a non-stratified site, meaning that you don't have a lot of historical layers going down. And that can lead to a lot of confusion because we have tons of overlapping post-hole features. We have a lot of burials that are situated within the area of the domestic portion of the site. So we talked earlier about the plaza. So if you're familiar with Mississippian sites, you generally have the main mound and then a plaza area in front of that. Here we do have the large central post that is still marked today here on the site, which is an integral part of Mississippian culture. But talk a little bit about the complexity of a site like this from the archaeological perspective. When you really start looking at a long habitation here with many burials, many post holes and structures, it looks unassuming to the eye as you approach it, but if you could really understand how complex the archaeology here is, it's quite intimidating. What do you say about that?
It is very complicated. The first village that was here was over 1,000 years ago and extended by the early 1400s before people moved away for their daily activities, but they're still coming back for a lot of different events. And this is very hard to see in some areas because of so many post holes and other features like hearths that just overlap one on top of the other. And people would not live in a single house for hundreds and hundreds of years. These are made out of sticks, branches, grass, and so these things need to be replaced. And so when whole buildings are replaced, that's more post holes that are being added to an area. So it's really all over the site, one of the most complicated games of connect the dots. It's just so many post holes that had to be related to each other.
That's exactly what it looks like. According to the early records, there were 15,000 features that have been documented here at the site, and only half have been excavated. So that gives you a general idea. And basically the portion of the site that is encompassed within the Palisades, how big is that as far as acres, approximately? 3, 4 maybe?
Yes, I can get exact numbers later.
Okay, well, to give you a general idea, it's not a huge site. So that is a lot of features that are packed very tightly. into a very small area. Again, this site was so close to being obliterated, as many of these mound sites have been, especially up in the Ohio Valley and other areas like that, due to agriculture, also due to landowners not necessarily understanding what it is that is on their property. And of course, a large mound to someone who's wanting to cultivate for crops is kind of in the way, and that's valuable property that they could use to put more crops on. So this site somehow, as you discussed earlier, was able to be saved, but really only about 25% of the core of the ceremonial mound, the initial mound, is original. Is that correct?
That is, yes. The mound had been excavated by local people for several years before scientific archaeology, and then under Dr. Coe, there was more archaeology so they could understand exactly how the mound was built, how many different layers and construction episodes, and then from all that information, they reconstructed the mound.
So what you see today is pretty accurate. I mean, it's never going to be exactly the same, but they've done a really good job here of trying to follow the patterns of the post holes and follow the structure of the site, so that when you come here, you get an authentic experience of what the layout would have been, at least to a degree. Of course, imagination has to be used in all of these situations to a degree. But again, our historic interpreters do a great job here. So let's talk about the decline in population, because this is something that we've seen across the board, not just at this site. But as we see that population decline, we see ritual and ceremonialism increase. So talk about how that affects things as far as maybe that desperate attempt to hang on to things in life, such as the population is decreasing. There may be ecological issues, there may be crop issues, there may be fisheries issues, and therefore people turn to that higher power. Do you see that reflected here at this site?
Yes. I usually talk about it in a slightly different way, but that is an interesting perspective. The population here at Town Creek by the early 1400s was moving away. And throughout the southeast, there was a series of droughts and slightly cooler temperatures. And so for many different reasons maybe, but that we can't always see, the people here decided not to have their daily households and their daily activities here anymore. So they moved away. They were still coming back here for a pretty long time for big events. And we still see that in the archaeological record. Glass beads have been found here, for instance. And so that extends the use of the site into the historic era. All the reasons we just don't know, but it is interesting to think about.
Yeah, oftentimes, as we've seen at other Mississippian sites, when climate issues would arise, droughts and things like that would occur, you would see for a brief period sort of a spike in ceremonialism, with them really doing everything they could to try to rectify that situation, and then often followed by a dispersal of the population out to more outlying areas. So again, with the central mound, platform mound, being kind of the main draw or feature of the site, what has the archaeology of the site told us about that specific structure? What do we know about it?
The mound is built on top of an earlier earth lodge, so a building that's buried into the ground a bit. From the outside, it would look like a low mound, but inside some similar activities would be going on. When that building collapsed, they built a 5 foot or thereabouts 5 foot wall around the remains of the building and filled that in with soil and put a square building on top of that, sort of like the one that's seen out there today. And then after another period of time, that building was cleaned out, burned, the pieces left in place, and more soil and another building was added on top. And that whole process of cleaning, burning, and rebuilding happened one more time. And so the mound is currently at about 15 feet tall.
Yeah, so it's a good-sized mound. As you approach, you'll definitely see it. It'll capture your vision and your imagination as you come up to the site. The other buildings that are available here, there are 2 other buildings that are on the property, reconstructions. Tell us a little bit about the 2 other buildings that people can see when they come to the site.
One of the other buildings is directly across from the mound. It was also a square building, and both of these areas were the only places on site where square buildings were built. So that signifies how important these areas were in the type of architecture. That building it looks to be in use about the time that the mound was built. The third building is a reconstruction of a house, and houses here were round. And so with 10 and more being built over time, and the village expanding over time. So the palisade wall was pushed back several times during the lifespan of this village. So there's just a lot of construction in all of these areas. But round buildings are seen here as houses and square buildings as religious political.
And as far as the site goes from the archaeological perspective, is there any indication of defensive structures, any issue of warfare or anything like that that's obvious from the archaeological record?
There is not anything obvious. The palisade that surrounds this site is a series of upright posts. There's no evidence that would have been daubed as an early version of the palisade showed. There's also no evidence of warfare at this site, so we don't see that sort of violence here. If people are coming here for trade and for religious holidays and to meet up with families, then that could be enough motivation to make sure things are running smoothly, to reach a compromise. There's also several games that were played in the Mississippian culture, like stickball and chunky, that could be used to also solve conflicts. So play the game, and whoever wins the argument. Yes,
a very important part of Mississippian culture for sure. Just out of curiosity, have any of those indicators been found here, discoidal stones or anything like that here on the property?
Yes, chunky stones were found here.
That's great. Well, again, one more thing to dig into if you're not familiar with that. It's a fascinating endeavor, a way of settling conflicts, but also a very popular sport that has led to some modern sports as well. Nonetheless, it's a fascinating site here in North Carolina. We're also kind of positioned not too far from some other well-known archaeological areas, such as Morrow Mountain State Park, the Rankin Museum's very close by. So if you do happen to come out, you can make sort of a day of it and see some of the other areas, attractions as far as prehistory goes. We certainly want to thank you, Megan, for joining us here today. If anybody is interested in coming out to the site, do you have a calendar of special events? Where should they go to find out kind of what's happening here at the site?
The best place for information would be our website and social media. We are open Tuesday through Saturday from 9 to 5, closed Sundays, Mondays, and major holidays. We do have events throughout the year, and those are posted on the calendars. And we hope people come out and see us.
Well, as always, we encourage you, if these are within driving distance, close to where you live, get out there, support these sites. They need visitors. They want to share the story of these incredible sites throughout the United States and throughout the world. So again, we thank you, Megan, for joining us here today. Beautiful site, one of my favorites, and we encourage everybody to come out and visit Megan and all the other great staff here at the Town Creek Mound in beautiful North Carolina. Thank you for joining us, Megan.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I want to thank Megan for her time. We had visitors coming and going as we were recording there in the break room, but we made the best of it, and she gave me a great tour, showed me all the details. Again, a beautiful place. They take really good care of it. They've added several new features there, trying their very best to make the interpretation as authentic and based in the archaeology as they can, and so they're doing a great job, and we just want to help support them. And as we always say, get more people out to these sites. You know, it's summertime, maybe the kids are out of school, take a few weekends, a trip here and there, go see some of these beautiful history and archaeological sites that we have here in North America. And it's definitely not something you'll regret. And, you know, I find that when kids go and they experience this, it kind of opens up those questions for mom and dad, right? So you're able to build on those conversations, and who knows where it might be inspiring the next generation of archaeologists and historians. So again, a great time here, a great way to kick off the summer. And again, we thank Megan and all of the staff there at the Town Creek Mound.
Certainly. And as always, of course, an excellent job on the interview there, Jason. I think for the time being, before I get back out here and start exploring forbidden caverns and catacombs and forgotten archaeological wonders, I think you have at least enough time to join me here for one more round at the Crosstime Pub. So why don't we pony up, sir? And again, a hat tip to James Waldo, who wasn't here with us tonight. Dahl requested his presence. I hear his television might be missing in action, but in any case, we'll have Jason back next time. As, of course, always, I'll be here, and James will be somewhere out there, too, perhaps if he gets away from his dinner date in time. And, of course, as always, you can find us out there somewhere in time, or out there on Facebook or on Instagram. So, Jason, you and I, sir, have time for one more, and all of you guys out there, especially those of you who are new to the podcast, we welcome you. You got a lot of listening to catch up on. For the rest who follow our endeavors every month, Jason, James, and I will return as always, and we'll pick up the conversation right here on the 7 Ages Audio Journal.